Today we have with us Mr. Reggie Smith. Reggie's life story, it tells about the saga of a man who has defeated so many death-defying moments, and still he rise. And that is the name of his organization, his multimedia publication, and the work that he does, Rise for War. And he'll explain what that means to you in just a moment. And so what I know to be true about this universe is that our tests are not for us, but it's for the work that we'll do with other people, so that when we become victorious, we are a shining example of what triumph looks like over these little nuances that we experience, that we each get to experience in life. So with that being said, and he is such a wonderful, dear friend of mine, so I present to you, world, Mr. Reggie Smith. Reggie, would you introduce yourself?
You really done a job that I couldn't do. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you, Sandy, and all the work that you do. So it's a joy to be around you, and thank you for having me. My name is Reggie Smith. I am from the south side of Jamaica, Queens. I am a father, a grandfather, and of course a child of God, from a family of four. I was raised by, a mother and a father who worked. We came from a middle-class family in a relatively low-income neighborhood. Of course, the south side of Jamaica, Queens, back in the 50s and the 60s was working blue-collar neighborhood, but it was also filled with a lot of black folks. And so, it came with the trauma that is part of our community, and was just for me something that was even more enhanced by the social events of the day. In the 60s, we had the civil rights, as well as we had to fight for so many other things, just to have some modicum of happiness in our lives. There was a lot going on outside. There was a lot of assassinations of our leaders. Malcolm, Martin, the Kennedys. It was a traumatic time, but it was a good time too. So I found myself wanting and needing to escape reality, and always had a sense of trying to find God. Didn't know exactly where he was, but somehow I felt like there was a need for some peace of mind. There was so much going on outside that my mind was always thinking. I was a pretty intelligent young man. As a matter of fact, got skipped in the second grade. They thought that I was kind of, precocious or just a bad kid. But no, I was angry because I didn't want to come back here. I remember from my past life, I remember drowning. And I remember coming back and telling God on the way back that I didn't want to come back. And so found myself back here on the planet. And I always tell the story saying I remember the doctor smacking me on the ass. And I said, man, you didn't have to do that. I was going to cry anyway. But, I've come to understand that we are all here for a reason. So I'm grateful to be here. But it is quite a journey. And so there was lots going on, not only outside in the world, but at home. My father was a police officer. My mother was a hairdresser. My father was a police officer, and so that in and of itself, a black cop in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, had even more stress. And so, he dealt with his stress by drinking, and so that caused some issues in the household, especially when there's a gun and there's drinking. It's not a good mix. So there was trauma in the house, outside the house. I escaped through sports, which I excelled at and probably could have played professional sports, but I fell into somewhere along the line around about, I graduated high school at 16, so I fell into a trap of once getting into college and getting my heart broken by a young lady. And all my friends had been doing hard drugs, heroin, methadone, all types of drugs from middle school and on. But I kind of escaped that through sports until I went to college. Even prior to that, I had been smoking plenty of weed, but I hadn't progressed to the hard drugs. Because, you know, people don't really pay attention, but my first drug was cigarettes. Nicotine was the first thing that took my willpower, because even then we knew smoking was not good for your health, and I wanted to be an athlete, but smoked anyway. And so once you start giving up your power with anything, then it's a downhill slide. You know, there's a level of discipline that I think that we need as human beings, or to be able to find some kind of balance. And I started losing that balance when I started smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, and then ultimately I surrendered to the pain, emotional pain of all that was going on. And I don't know what kind of show this is, if it's PG or not, but to be quite frank with you, when I started saying these two words is when it really took a dive. I got my feelings hurt by a young lady, and I said, fuck it. You know, and once I started saying that and started getting more comfortable with it, it made it easier for me to start using drugs and alcohol as a way to, you know, escape, and sex as well. You know, and I thought that it was, back then, I've come to understand now that it wasn't only an escape, but it was an opportunity. It was a way for me to try to find God, to try to still my mind, because come to find out that my mind can be my best friend or my worst enemy, and it's my best friend when it leads me to the light and sound within, but it's my worst enemy when it's all the time chattering and keeping me distracted from the actual journey that we come here for, that I've come here for, which is to find that spirit and that God within, and to let that light shine out in the world. So I didn't know that, but it felt pretty good when I was getting high, until it didn't. Because you know, that path to enlightenment is an expensive path, come to find out, in the physical world. And so it costs me a number of things over time. Not the least of which was my mental health, my spiritual connection, and because of the guilt and the all of the things that one does in order to physically maintain drug habits, causes shame and guilt, and I was lucky it didn't cost me any time, as it were, in terms of jail or prison or anything like that, because the ends of addictions, I've come to understand, are jails, institutions, and death. And so I was able to escape those things. But I had to pay a price of the diseases that I contracted as a result, because I was an IV drug user after I got clean in 1985 through God's grace. The pain just was overwhelming, and it was either die, kill myself, or something else. And I didn't even know what that something was, but it ended up being surrender. And I surrendered to try to get some help. And when I reached out for help was there. And I was able to find out about 12-step programs, and so I got stopped using one day at a time in 1985, January 29th, that is. It was a cold day, snowy day. But since then, you know, I've learned a lot about myself. I've deepened my connection with a power of my understanding, my higher power. And I think that I've been more of a productive member of society, you know, been able to develop a family and a sense of self and a connection with spirit. And so I was getting back to just the connection with spirit without the use of drugs has come through trying to take care of myself. I contracted as a result. It took me a few years before I found out after being clean. I was engaged with a young lady who has since become my wife, and I got pregnant. And you know, we did at the time, IV drug users, people who were having homosexual sex were supposedly the people who were contracting HIV and AIDS and dying in a grotesque manner. And so, really didn't give too much thought to it. That couldn't happen to me, even though I had been shooting dope. No, it couldn't happen to me. But I had to find out once we got pregnant. As I'm glad my wife and my son, their test came back negative, but mine didn't. Mine came back positive, and it actually came back positive as what is understood to be full-blown AIDS, which is simply a designation. It's a mindset. Actually, it's a biological marker for a person who has the virus or retrovirus present in your blood system, and also your T cells, which are the measure of your white blood cells, that your fighter cells, are less than 200, and they're supposed to be within the range of 750 to 1500, somewhere there. So my immune system was compromised, and when a person's immune system is compromised to that extent, and with the knowledge that we had at the time, people that were having full-blown AIDS were perishing quickly and dying from a number of diseases, not from the retrovirus itself, but from opportunistic infections, because our immune systems had been compromised. But more importantly, in a lot of instances, what I found was that our mental state and that our emotional state was affecting our immune systems as well. And so the fear of the acknowledgement of full-blown AIDS, the designation of full-blown AIDS, was scaring people to death. Even when people were getting tested, the idea was, the intention was at the time that it was your life expectancy was about 6 months. You should get your personal affairs in order because you're going to die. And a lot of people would die in 5 months, or would give up and do things, to just, self-destruct over a shorter period of time, because they were afraid of what we had seen, which was grotesque ways that people were dying, just wasting away. There's a lot of suffering that was going on, and so there was a lot of fear. And the biggest thing to do was to try to fight that fear. And thank God that I had been involved in 12-step programs and had a network of love around me and a family that loved me, because I was able to, through a lot of trial and tribulation, tap into that love. It's not the easiest thing to do, but we were able to do it, and love and perseverance and a change of lifestyle, because I became aware of the things that were affecting our lifestyle around us. Part of the struggle with the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and just becoming more aware of what was killing our community and killing people around me. But before HIV, in terms of diabetes, heart disease, and all the things, it just didn't make sense to me that they were disproportionately affecting the African American community. And so I was like, what are the commonalities? What connects us all? And it's the food, the air, and the water. And those things in my community, and all around me, were not up to par, and it was some of it was things that we could change, and some not, So I set out to try to mitigate the damage for myself, because I wondered if I had a son that was coming. I'm kind of nosy. I'd like to see how he was going to grow up and be. I already had one son, but I wanted to see how that was going to turn out. So I stopped smoking cigarettes, which was probably the hardest. That was harder than heroin to kick. Then I stopped eating meat. I changed the way that I ate. I started living a vegan lifestyle. I started practicing meditation regularly, exercising, and spreading love, and being as positive a person as I possibly could be, and trying to fight the fear of death, and enjoy life a day at a time. And so I got that insurance money, and we started traveling, seeing the world, I was able to stick around and see my son, and then, still watching people perish, and changing my lifestyle. And this was before medication, so there wasn't like we could fall back on the medications, so herbs, and different things were available, and so I used what was available. and stayed as positive as possible. And the years started going by, and through God's grace, my wife and I, we're still together. We were still together, and she's the most amazing woman, because at the time, to be engaged or living with or even having sex with someone that you knew was HIV positive was a very courageous thing to do. And so I thank you very much, because the fear of I think one of the greater fears of an HIV positive person, with all of the hysteria that was going around, was that we were not going to be loved. And with the stigma that was being shown by a lot of folks, that was not an unrealistic thing to think about. Some people were deprived of love, and and many of them are not here now as a result. And so I'd like to say that Love Healed Me got more of a manifestation of that in 2005, when after the stress, I had actually not talked about publicly what I was going through, and I was compelled to do so by the spirit within at that point, because I had survived and thrived. Even though I was talking about love and talking about the changing of lifestyles, it didn't seem like people were really understanding what I was saying. And so I felt the need, and I was compelled to be more direct about my experience. And my wife was not ready for that. She was in the church, and she was in the choir, and she had a business, and the stigma was going to cause a problem. And come to find out that there were issues that we hadn't even really dealt with between us, because we were able to kind of bury it and just live a day at a time, which was, it was functional, it worked. But we actually did need to deal with those things, and I needed to speak about it. So it looked like we weren't going to make it. And I felt like I loved her enough to have to let her go, but I appreciated all that she had shared. But the idea of not being with her caused me the stress. And the stress made me sick. And I got, to a point where I was 116 pounds, and it wasn't good. Actually, they told my family that if I lived another 3 days, that it would be a miracle. But that was in 2005. And once again, that was an opportunity really for all of the love that we had shared with so many people over the course of years to be returned tenfold, 100-fold. And that love and the practice of the things that we had learned during the course of the time, or spiritual, in terms of energy medicine. I had loved ones and friends who came and used crystals and used, and I can't think of the science right now because I'm a little cloudy, but there's different types of energy medicine and love, and they moved mountains. And unfortunately, some of those folks are no longer with. People that prayed for me are no longer with us. But through God's grace, here we are, some 15 years later than that. So it's been, I contracted the virus, and I also contracted hepatitis C from IV drug use. So it's been over 33 years now, 34 years that I've been living with. Well, actually, I'm not living with hepatitis C anymore because they came up with a medication that has eradicated that. But they weren't even worried about the hepatitis C when they diagnosed the HIV, because they said that was a long-acting disease, and it would be a long time before I'd be dead and gone before that ever was a concern. But they were, and I'm grateful. So it has been a long time. There's been a lot of emotional and mental effects that one has to mitigate and navigate over the course of life. I'm really grateful for having a 12-step program to refer to, and a network of people that I can identify with, especially men, because there are groups of men that I'm connected with that are just phenomenal. They're all on the same path of life, and we've all had similar or common experiences with drugs and alcohol, but the trauma is really what's at the core of our experience here on the planet this time, and it really is something phenomenal to see that how the therapeutic value of people trying to heal themselves, sharing their stories, is invaluable. And having understood that, something that I want the world to share. And I think that we all are recovering from something. And so, it's, it's hard for people to sometimes get beyond ego and whatever it is that keeps us from surrendering to that fact. It's not an idea, it's actually a fact. But, whoever we can touch, and I think that was part and is part of the frustration as well. I really had to learn to accept that we are not going to heal everyone. That I remember when I was in TC, a therapeutic community, trying to heal from drugs, and they had me. I was young, and they sensed that I wanted to help people. So they used to have me stand up before I said anything in an open forum and say that my name is Dr. Reggie and I'm here to heal all of you, which was an indication that, I just really want to help folks get beyond things. But I had to learn that you can't help anyone until you help yourself. And that the best assistance that I could provide is to be an example. And so we do the best that we can, and I don't beat myself up when I'm not perfect. None of us are, I don't think. Jesus, is that you? No, but we do the best that we can. And so every opportunity, I've had the opportunity to write a book about some of the things. And then the whole inspiration of Rise for War is just that. It's resurrecting inspirational spiritual experiences for wellness, awareness, and recovery. And after a lot of reflection, that seemed to be the baseline of the experience. Is resurrecting inspirational spiritual experiences is us telling our stories, because we all have a story, and we're all the stars of our own story. And we're all here to give and share something, but when we don't do that, I think that we are not as connected to the whole. And the more that I connect and the more that we connect to the whole, the more we put all of our pieces together, the sooner we'll reach critical mass and shift the paradigm, which I believe we're close to. I think we're getting pretty close, but I always feel that way, and I always want to stick around until it happens and beyond. So, it's the body and mind don't know what the situation is. They only know what the response is. My understanding is that we are energetic beings having a human experience, and so that there are the chakra system is connected energetically to our endocrine system. And so just like our endocrine system are the glands that create the hormones and the parasympathetic responses that allow us to function on the planet. And so those chakra systems are connected to sound and light. And there's, I'm told, 7 levels of energy surrounding us. And so fear is an invader that pierces through the sound and the light and those energies, and so the thymus, which is the 4th chakra, is where our T cells are generated. It's all a disruption, and so all of the fear that's being generated out in the world now, in terms of the media, the things that are happening in the world with all of the wars and the killing, the things that black people have had to experience and continue to experience on the planet, are all reasons to be afraid. But if we become more aware, of those things, then maybe we can mitigate it, to the best of our best extent. And so meditation, prayer, and a number of different other things, and that's where the wellness, awareness, and recovery. So I believe we're all recovering from something that when we're aware